Hi, welcome to Total Health Magazine. I'm your host, John Barson, and I'm very happy today to be talking to an amazing woman. In fact, some would call her a divine rock star. And we'll get into that in a moment. Ava Miles is joining us today on the program. She is an international best-selling author. Her first book, which was published way back in 2015, was a number one national bestseller, Nora Roberts Land. And since then, this prolific writer has cranked out almost 30 books. And the reason we're talking today is because she's released a really interesting series that's touched a nerve with me. It's called The Goddess Guides. And luckily for me, Jennifer reached out to us and sent me a copy of the book, Goddesses Don't Do Drama. And I opened it up, I read the first line. I got to the first line in the book, and where is it here? Oh yeah, we're all goddesses and gods in a body. And when I read that line, boy, it lit me up. I had to get back in touch with Jennifer and say, please, please, please get me Ava Miles. I want to talk with her. So Ava, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, John. I'm so excited to be here. Yay!
Well, it's when you think of goddesses and gods. The reason why that line really struck a note with me is because, and I want to hear your epiphany, and I want you to share your epiphany with your readers and our viewers. But for me, I was actually in a mountain meadow in a place called Manning Park in beautiful British Columbia. I was on an afternoon hike, and I was sitting in this meadow, and I looked at this rock, and I thought, wow. And then I thought in my mind, I wonder what a moon rock looks like. And then my next thought was, how does that rock compare to the beauty of the flowers? And I'm like, wow, those flowers are alive. And then my next thought, because my mind was starting to race, being ADD, and my next thought was the bugs that were crawling around, how much more complex they were. And then I thought, wow, what about us? I mean, really, what we are is we're gods to these creatures. And then I thought about the search for extraterrestrial life, and I thought, hey, wait a minute, we got it right here. And then I realized all people, regardless of race, color, creed, looks, when you compare any single individual to any other life form in the universe, we're just simply beyond description, aren't we?
We're just wonderful. Yeah. I mean, they say we're made from stardust, and and we certainly are. Everything in the universe is inside of us, which is why I think we're all divine rock stars, because we're all uniquely gifted. Our fingerprints, everybody has a different fingerprint. I mean, doesn't that blow your mind? I mean, you can be identified by your teeth. I mean, nobody has the same. And it's just besides that, someone can paint, somebody can write, somebody can build a bridge. We all have so many amazing things that we all have to offer the world. To me, as divine rock stars, which are we're from God. That's kind of my epiphany was, I was raised Catholic, and I was always told I was a child of God. And it's as I got to be an adult, it was okay, but what does that mean when I become an adult? And it was I'm a divine rock star. That's my easiest way to say it, is we're all divine rock stars. We're all special. We're all beautiful. We all have this innate divine nature and all these gifts. And so why not start claiming that and living from that place?
Absolutely. What was it was that the epiphany that got you to write the series, or there must be more to that? I mean, how did the concept of the Goddess Guides evolve?
Sure. Well, the epiphany was discussed it in the introduction for all the Goddess Guides, was basically just a complete recognition and vision of me as that goddess. It was that moment where I saw myself as beautiful, powerful, at peace, calm, because I feel like those are all really integral pieces. And I just was radiant with light, with love, but just completely, everything was just perfect. Not artificially, but everything was just in harmony with the world. And that was a really profound moment. And it was the first time I'd really seen myself as beautiful, as calm, as not having to strive, not having to have stories around, what I needed to do to get this type of thing to happen in my life. All the things, all the stories that we sort of build up in our lives. And so the Goddess Guides, well, I mean, I'm a spiritual person. That's just who I am. I've been spiritual since I was a kid. And so for me, the Goddess Guides information just kept coming through when I would meditate. And it just became obvious. I'd had some fiction books that I had been thinking I was going to do on topics. I mean, all my books really talk about empowering women, but also empowering all of us to live from that truest place inside of ourselves, our divine selves. I don't necessarily always call it that in fiction books, but I talk about, like really becoming that person that you truly are. Maybe you've learned from betrayal that, for example, a couple of my characters either are physical, domestic abuse, that you weren't being loved for who you are, but it's like, who are you really? And who do you really want to be in the world? And so most of my characters go through that journey, that transformation of true self, because I feel like in order to be really with another person, to really connect with someone, connecting from that truest place is the best way. So I had these ideas for these books, which, in fiction may end up happening in the future. But suddenly it just became so clear that I needed to write this series of nonfiction books related to the goddess guides to being a woman and all the issues that sort of trip us up, anything related to, for example, toxic relationships and how to go and have loving partnerships, for example, to sacred sex, divine union, lovemaking, sex, that kind of thing, to creative expression and expressing like our truest feelings, money, like and self-worth and, personal power, all of those types of aspects that we sort of struggle with. And it felt like I finally had gotten to a place in my own spiritual development, my own evolution with my gifts. I've got healing gifts, psychic gifts as well, in addition to, like creative gifts. And it was just a perfect meld of expressing like and being a divine channel in order to go and share a lot of that about what our true nature is and what my experiences have been. Kind of some of them have been hard fought. Right. But how to be a happy power pack goddess is kind of how I say it, because if we're wanting to live a life of love and joy from a place where we feel grounded in who we are, and to me that's our sense of personal power, that we believe we have worth, we believe we are deserving of all the good things in the world, and can connect with people. Like that's sort of, to me, like that's why we're here, and that's kind of how I decided to live my life.
Right. Well, I like the way you've written the books as well, the guides. The one I have, again, is Goddesses Don't Do Drama. So I'm going to be relying on that one for our chat today. But one thing that I was curious about, because as a writer of some obviously very popular books, where did you get the background and the knowledge to write the guides the way you did? And let me back up a moment when I asked that. When I was producing and hosting the Changing Family radio program, the one thing that we did on that radio show was we did workshops. So it wasn't anybody telling you what to do or anything. It was workshop designs to bring people in so they would be part of it if they could call in and be part of that particular workshop. And you've done that with the book. You have great exercises. Where did you get the understanding to develop the exercises and the concepts in such a way that they would work so well?
Sure. Well, I think it's a good amalgamation of, as I said, sort of kind of divine information, but also my own practical experience of helping people throughout my life, but especially, when my healing gifts came through. I had a lot of people who, had known, for example, like I had a lot of personal illness in my life. I almost died when I was 26. I broke my hip when I was 14. I was told I wasn't going to walk again, and I managed to overcome all those odds. And suddenly, after everyone had seen all the things that I'd gone through in my life, I was like healthier than I'd ever been. I'd managed to I'm in 2 medical journals. I managed to blow the minds of sort of doctors, because I was able to heal, but I was able to get to the core issues and become this happy person who suddenly started living her truth. I walked away from a 6-figure career in a very successful profession in Washington, D.C. And most of my friends and colleagues said I was crazy, but I would also were like, hey, good for you for going for your dream of wanting to be an author. And I'd been wanting to do that since I was a kid. And so suddenly it all started to come together. And so people were sending people to me to talk to who were having trouble in their lives, in their marriages. Some of them were sick. Some of them were depressed. Some of them were trying to figure out what to do in retirement. And so suddenly like I'm using my healing gifts to help them. And then I'm writing at the same time and those messages are coming through. So it all just kind of worked, you know, and I had to do a lot of listening. I mean, I'm writing, like I said, the final 2 goddess guides right now. And, you know, it's like, sometimes it's like, I have to go just meditate and listen and be like, okay, what do we want to say here? How do you overcome this particular piece? Or I have to like look inside myself and say, where has there been a situation in my life where I've overcome this? And then I'm like, right. And then it all just kind of like sinks in, if that makes sense. Because sometimes that personal sense of reflection, you're like, okay, right. And then it all just sort of works. But I mean, I've also had, you know, my own spiritual teachers. They were very helpful in my formative years. And some of that's a blend of things that worked really nicely as well. So it's just a really nice amalgamation of the things that I felt were most empowering to women and what I felt were, at least from the people that I've helped, have been the most powerful to move forward. Because, you know, for me, I realized the biggest thing was to not buy into this ego's stories that were plaguing me all the time. And once I decided to not just step back from that, but to reconnect myself with my heart, because I really believe that's like the greatest piece for all of us, is that we can sort of settle those stories down and just kind of get rid of them. And once you know what your stories are and what you know, because I call them, like, you can call them trigger points, but once you know sort of what those main pieces are that you're struggling with or that seem to come up all the time, then it's like you can kind of just obliterate them or put them sort of like, if they simmer up a little bit, you can put them back down.
Right. Well, you know, the guide I'm reading so far reads very, very well. One of the things that I always promote is if you're going to fix anything in regards to relationships and whatnot, it always starts with yourself. I remember we had a one caller to the Changing Family. A woman called in. We were talking about conflict in marriage, and she said that she had tried for months and months and months, or years, probably years actually. I think back now, to get her husband to change, and she wanted to go to college. You know, the kids were growing, and she wanted to go to college, and she was growing and wanted to expand her horizons. And her husband was very, very threatened by that. So she was trying to get him to change, to do more, drink less, and do all of these things. And then she said one day she decided to just stop that, and she decided to just start working on herself. And she enrolled in college, local community college, and started these programs, and said an interesting thing happened. As she started to work on herself, her husband very quickly realized, whoa, something's going on here, and he changed. He supported her, and she said it wasn't easy at first, but he came around on his own. So after all those years of trying to change him, she decided to just, hey, you know, I'm done with that. I'm just gonna make myself better, and he took that lead, and their marriage grew stronger. And when we talk about that, it's really an important aspect of your health. I mean, Total Health Magazine is about all aspects of health. And I firmly believe one of the most important aspects of your health is how you view yourself, how you feel about yourself. And as you talk about in your books, it starts with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think that most of us, you know, when we finally reckon with our truest self and our truest desire for something better, is we have to realize we can't change anybody. The only person we can change is ourselves. And sometimes the sense of powerlessness that people end up sort of falling into, either because they really want to try to change somebody, you know, they're so attached to this vision of that person and how that person needs to be for them. And that person maybe doesn't want to, you know, and maybe that'll be a change that they have to make. And maybe that'll be a change that they can't. But it's one of the, for me, at least personally, I mean, I discuss, you know, like from my experience, my father is an alcoholic, and it is very difficult to be in a situation in which someone who, you know, you love very deeply doesn't necessarily change something that you know is hurting them. But that is what they have decided to do. And giving people the freedom to learn their lesson, to live their lives, even in the midst of seeing things that we feel aren't perhaps loving choices for themselves. Like, that's our own judgment. That's our own perception. And so, like, stepping back, finding ways to be at peace with that, because to me, you know, allowing other people to live their lives is important, but at the same time, you can choose how you want to be treated in a relationship. And if those things are not aligned, I just call you're not a good match. And that's been a very freeing way to look at it, because then you don't get into judgy situations in which I call it victim perpetrator language. It's like, well, you're like this and I'm like this and we're, blah, blah, blah. Those aren't the kind of loving, kind ways that we deeply want to talk from our hearts to other people. But if we just sort of step back and say, okay, you're making these choices and that's okay, and I'm making these choices, they just don't work for me. Then you can sort of say, okay, we're just not a good match right now. And maybe that will change, but you don't have to remain in something that's making you deeply unhappy or feeling powerless.
Right. Well, here's something to think about. One of the things I liked about your book, this particular book, is that you went right back to the beginning, and that's actually where it starts, family of origin. I did study family of origin theater at the Justice Institute, and when I started to understand family of origin theory, and I looked at what was happening in the workplace, at the radio station I was working at, boy, I could see that, that guy was the alcoholic, that guy was the enabler, that woman was and so on. I was like, wow, it just opened up my mind. And but sometime later, we were doing a show on divorce, marriage and divorce. There was a study that was published, and this was quite interesting. They found that in this particular study, the longer you were the longer you were together, live in a relationship before you got married, the sooner you got divorced.
How interesting.
Think about that. Like, you're thinking, wait a minute, because for example, couples that were together 7 years, if there was a divorce, they would get divorced sooner than a couple that had only been together a year or maybe 6 months or 2 years. And I thought, well, that was interesting. And so we had this conversation with a psychologist and a therapist and a social worker and on this particular program, and we were talking about that. And what occurred to me was, well, when you think about it, you have eventually decided to call two stages of your relationship life. You have your family of origin relationships, where, as you so adroitly point out in your book, that when you're a baby, hopefully your parents are loving and nurturing, and all you know is this loving and nurturing. But as you get a little older, you start to learn how to communicate, and you learn how to deal, if you have siblings, how to communicate with your siblings, if you're first, second, or third in line, and so on and so forth. So you establish these early family of origin relationships. But then one day you leave the nest, you go to preschool or kindergarten, and now you're starting to learn how to develop different types of relationships. You're still relying on, not consciously, but you still have that skill set from your family of origin. But if you think about it, you sometimes, you'll often treat friends much different than you would treat a family member. And I think that when you're living together, again, this was just a thought that I had, you're probably in a peer relationship, but and this is what triggered it for me, when you get married, something changes. And I think when you get married, that subconsciously you revert to a family of origin relationship in your unconsciousness. And I say that because I interviewed so many couples when we were investigating and doing work on marriage preparation for that program. And I interviewed all these couples before, during, and after in these marriage preparation programs, and then after they were married. And it was very common that a spouse would say, before we were married, he was wonderful, or she did this and it worked out. And then somehow after we got married, things changed. And when I dug into it, I found that they were starting to exhibit habits in their family of origin that were driving their partners crazy.
Right. Because, we observe these patterns, right? These are the ways we learn how to handle things in the world. And that's that core family structure. And so unless we have conscious intention and conscious sort of recognition about what we've learned, like I basically walk people through that are reading Goddesses Don't Do Drama. What's your relationship profile? Do you even know what it is? Like, what did you learn in your family of origin? And maybe what don't you want to carry forward? I know there were a lot of things that I knew I did not want to carry forward, for example. And so how do you consciously basically come to an understanding of what that looks like. For example, one of my favorites, and I've done this with so many of my girlfriends, they find themselves dating the same guy, or they marry the same guy, and it doesn't work out. And it's like, okay, what's your relationship profile? What do all these people have in common? Dave, Joe, Matt, Kevin, like put it on a poster board and start to go and roll down, like, what are the common themes of all your relationships with these guys? And it was so like freeing to them, because they started to see, oh my God, there's a pattern. There are these things that were common throughout all of these people, these core relationships. And once they sort of looked at what that was and saw where that was coming from in themselves, what were they looking for that they weren't giving themselves, or that they didn't believe about themselves, and their true, God or God nature or what have you, they were able to start clearing those patterns, but also start recognizing the pieces that they needed to sort of heal and overcome. And like that has changed so many people's, perspectives. And that's just a simple example, because, I know so many women who say that, probably men who say that too.
Yes.
And, that's something that if you want to have a happy, connected relationship in a marriage, for example, like it's important to know, what did you learn and what patterns did you pick up? Because when those moments where you're facing something new, say like in a marriage, you're going to go back, even unconsciously, your brain's going to want to go back to this treasure trove of a file and say, okay, when you see this happen in a marriage, what do you do? Well, you're going to do what your parents did, because it's probably the only time you were exposed to that in the home. And you might not want to act. You may not want to act from that place. And it's like, okay, so for me, if something like that happens in a relationship, I'll be like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm getting tight, I'm getting upset. And I'm like, and I know I'm right now, I'm back in being a kid, and I can see my parents having this discussion, for example, and I don't want to be in that place. And it's like, okay, just give me a little bit to breathe. Let me express kind of what I'm feeling. But I'm like, I don't want to feel like this, because I know this is not us. And then it sort of like diffuses it all.
Oh, you're going to love this piece. I just remember something. I did an interview with Ross Pelton. He wrote the book, The Pill Problem, which is all about the side effects of birth control. And we were talking about that, and he brought up something that I hadn't heard of. And then when I Googled it, well, I found tons of information on it. But when you're on birth control, it changes your pheromones. So women actually attract the wrong people just by being on birth control. It's potentially, I'm sure that's not the case with everybody, but it changes your body, it changes your chemistry, and so you put out the wrong pheromone profile, to use your word, and so you attract the wrong people. But I also think when it comes to attraction, I think that if you're in a very healthy space, if you're happy and you've gone through the Goddess Guides, the ones you've got so far, and you finished the next two, and you're in a happy place, you've eliminated the toxicity in your relationships, you're grounded, you're confident, they're going to attract somebody who's the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's been my experience, is that the more I was willing to examine my relationships, see which ones were currently, ones that made me happy. One thing that I remember doing when I was first going through my big transformation is I started to realize, or when I would show up with friends, I would say, did I laugh? That was a simple, basic question. Did I laugh? Because I love to laugh, and I wanted more laughter in my life. And I was like, wow, I didn't laugh once with this person. Like, there wasn't even any energy related to being able to laugh about something, and I have a pretty good sense of humor, and I could pretty much laugh about anything, but there was no laughter. And I thought, I don't know that this person isn't making me happy. And it's not them. It's like, we're just not a good match. For whatever reason. And so I started examining, who did I really want to see? I had friends, I have a couple girlfriends who felt this way. There were certain people that they would dread going to dinner with. They'd be like, oh, like they're my friend, but they weren't excited to go to dinner with those people. And it was like, I finally was like, okay, why am I not excited? I should only be excited to see these people. These are my friends. And so you start looking at those relationships, and even ones with your family, at least I did, in ways that I felt were supportive and were necessary. And it takes sometimes some really good soul searching. Sometimes it's really painful, because you want to feel a certain way about a brother or a sister or a cousin or an aunt or even a parent, but you realize that there have been things all along that haven't really been happy. And the more you've gotten older, the more it's like the more experiences that you've had that are not happy. And so it starts to get its own momentum to where you feel like family get-togethers are like, they're like a boulder, like on your chest, and you just dread going, or you come away, you get sick while you're there, or you leave there and you feel exhausted. I don't know how many times I used to say I needed another vacation after I went home. And it was like, well, what's that about? I should be so excited. But I heard so many people who would say that they get back from, vacation, and they'd say, oh my gosh, like I need another vacation. And it's like, well, probably around some toxicity, probably around some negativity, not feeling super supported, because when we're happy, we're supported. When we feel loved, we're supported. Like I said, that's something all of us, if we choose to do stuff with our own relationships, to kind of look at.
I couldn't agree with you more. How many books do you have in this series right now?
I have 7 that are out. I released all 7 in August. I wanted to, it's nobody's ever done it in nonfiction because it was quite a feat. And I have to say, like the last month coming up to it, it was like, oh my goodness, is everything going to come in alignment? I was, talking to Amazon and iBooks and, Barnes and Noble and Kobo and Google Play, and just making sure everything was going to go live at the same time. Everything was like, okay. But I wanted to make sure that, it's the reason I wrote them all at the same time too. I wanted women to have more than one resource to go to. Like you don't have to read every goddess guide. That's the thing, is every goddess guide is on a topic that may or may not resonate with you. And so you might be having great sex, connected sex, like it's great, it's fabulous, but you don't necessarily feel like you're making the kind of money or getting the kind of abundance that you want. And so that's the goddess guide that you might want to sort of choose. Or, you're doing great when it comes to personal power. But at the same time, like you don't feel like you've got a great situation with, say, eating, you're still struggling with food, and your body image, for example. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to just leave people hanging, I know how important, and I get my emails from readers like, when's the next book going to come out? And I just felt like I wanted to make sure that I had, I was only able to get 7 sort of done at the same time, which is why Fear and Happiness are coming in January of 2018. But there'll be just this nice package that people could go to and could give to other people too. Because, I know for me, I have friends who are like, okay, I'm struggling with this. Or they have a friend who's struggling with this. And it's like, they're like, well, maybe I want to give them a goddess guide, because that'll go and help them, get tools basically and have some internal reflection about it. Because to me, the goddess guides are all about the tools. It's the awareness, yes, but it's the tools, because, I believe our truest goddess nature is that intuitive one that always knows. It always knows what's right for us. It always knows what direction we need to go to. And if we aren't sure about that, we probably have some story or some other sort of stuff in the way. And once we center and get back to that part of ourselves, that we're really unstoppable. We're always going to know what's best for us. Right.
Yeah, again, I agree with you. I do like the way you've written the books, because you could have created a 2,000-page book with everything in one. But I like your I like your approach, because you're right. I think because we're all different, and different topics attract our interest because we're in different stages of relationships, and the goddesses don't do drama might appeal to me today, but if somebody else, it might be the happiness, or the, like you said, one of the other topics. And I remember being on a media tour myself when we did our book on relationships, and I remember one television station, when I talked to their whoever was booking the shows, they said, well, I'm not sure, we did a show on relationships, we did a bit on relationships last fall. I said, oh, so everybody in the country happened to watch that segment at that particular time, and now nobody needs any other information on relationships. No. So you're right. We're in different stages of relationships. We have different needs, and again, that's really why I like your series, because I'm absolutely 100% convinced that the titles, some of them salacious, will attract different people at different times in their lives.
Right. Well, salacious is a good story too. And the other thing about the Goddess Guides is I wanted something that was user friendly and accessible. I have millions of female readers, and I know how busy they are. I know having something that, gets to the sort of heart of things, that isn't some serious tome that just tells them like all the reasons that they're wrong. Like, that is not who I'm about. That is not how I write. I mean, I've been told since I wrote my first book, I'm a very conversational writer. Everyone always feels like, the dialogue, the way in which I talk to people, it's like I'm sitting across from them in a coffee shop and we're just having a great conversation. That's who I am, because to me, that's connection. And even though I may not have all my readers in my office when I'm writing to all of those people. And I'm wanting to communicate from like the truest, most accessible part of me. That's just like, I'm just another, goddess. I'm just another human being who's trying to figure all this out too. And, I've gone through my stories. Other people are going through their stories. And the biggest thing is, how do we express that and share and connect so that we can all continue to elevate each other and live, these, to me, happier existences in which we do feel like there's kindness in the world, there's connection. There's so much negativity, it seems like, that a lot of us are just so tired of and so fed up. It's like, why can't someone just be kind in that situation? Right. Or how did someone just decide that their way in which they're going to use their platform is just complete unkindness, negativity, bullying, or what have you? And it's across the boards. And I think so many people, and I know that's one of the reasons people love to follow me on Facebook, for example, too, is like, I just see that as my front porch. It's like, let's just be positive. Let's just share good stories. Let's share stories about, men and women. I call them, goddess spotlights, or goddess supporters. And I talk about men who are just doing wonderful things in the world, who are special, who are connected, who are exhibiting love, the kind of values that I think, human values that we all so desperately want to see more examples of.
Right. Well, I know you did not write this whole series since the Weinstein debacle has taken place in major media. And I was booking this interview before Weinstein was outed. But look at the momentum that's building right now with the Me Too and all the stories, and women who are now coming forward and sharing their pain and their stories. I as much as it was tragic that those things happened to them, I'm just really happy that we're talking about this. And I can't think of we talked before we went on the air about the stars in alignment, because your book was published on the day of the eclipse. Is that correct?
Yeah, except I didn't know it was the eclipse when I chose the pub date.
Yeah, you didn't time it, but it was like, whoa, wait a minute, there's a sign from the heavens.
But I kind of laughed when I found out. I was like, oh, of course.
Yeah, so, but again, I think the timing is perfect, because not just from the eclipse perspective, but from people's perspective that are now looking for ways to deal with the damage that was done to them when they were in whatever particular, whether it was their family of origin, or whether it was sexual harassment or assault in the workplace. So I'm really encouraged by your series, Ava. I have to say, I think it's going to help. You're going to help a lot of people, both women and men.
Well, like I said, that's my hope. I've experienced, just on the Weinstein case, just within the last week and a half, I felt so motivated to share tips for women about how to handle sexual harassment, because it's something I've experienced. Hashtag me too. And so I was like, what are people not talking about? People aren't talking about how to teach women what maybe to do in that situation. And so, I just spontaneously sat down and decided to do a short video on my YouTube channel, for example, about things that I've learned to get basically to prepare people for what is a really horrible reality and eventuality, is so many women, as you can see from all the stories that are coming out, have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, have experienced sexual assault, for example, have been asked to trade sex for promotions, for salary increases, for a job, for a better grade, for example. And it's just terrible. I hope that we can get to the core reason of why this is happening. I was even talking with my BFF yesterday, and she was saying, 1 in 4 women are date raped. And, I've known that statistic, but for some reason, like, it just came out of my mouth. And I was like, what does that say that 1 in 4 men, like, in that situation, I'm like, they're men are rapists. I was like, what is going on with the masculine? That it's like, what can we do to sort of address and help that too? And so the goddess guides, like I said, I even say in the beginning, the goddess guides are, basically for women. That's how I'm in a woman's body. That's, I'm going through these lessons, and we have some human ones, but there's certain ones that women have. But I said, I hope someone can do, a guide for men too, because they're hurting too, obviously. And we need them. We need them as well, to kind of discover and remember who they are as well.
Well, I'm a man. Last time I checked, I actually got a lot of information from your books. So I actually think your books are well worth reading by guys as well.
Awesome. Well, I say, just change some of the pronouns. I mean, there might be certain examples that, aren't necessarily, gender specific, but, like a lot of it, I think is about being a human being. But I just, like I said, felt like it was really important to talk about, brand it sort of as one for goddess guides for women.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time here. Jennifer asked me not to take you past a half hour because you have got a deadline with your next two books here. So I will acquiesce. I could talk with you for hours.
Yeah, it's always wonderful, isn't it? I always feel like, there should be, a little bit more. But yeah, I do have words to put on the page, as I say. And since, I've put out, as you said, how many titles in the last, since 2014, I'm pretty dedicated to doing that and making sure that I still have readers who are like, can't you write faster? And I'm just like, my goodness, I write faster than most people in the publishing industry.
You absolutely do. I mean, you're a prolific writer. I love your dedication to your craft, and I do like the way you write. You have a colloquial way of writing, so I do. I think it will. A lot of people will relate to the way you write.
Great. Well, I'm so grateful to be able to share this moment and share this discussion because, like I said, it's so nice to have another man who appreciates all that's in the Goddess Guides, but also another man who's doing so many good things in the world. So thank you for that from my heart.
Can't recommend it enough. This is Total Health Magazine. My guest today, Ava Miles. You can pick her books up online. You can pick them up in the bookstore. Of course, we've got the links here. And I encourage anybody to read the Goddess Guides. And I look forward to reading more. And can't wait for the last two that are coming out. You said in January?
In January. Goddesses face fear, about divine courage, and goddesses are happy. You bet. Living a good life.
I know what I'll be doing early in the year then.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, John.
I'll sit on top of Coyoacan in Mexico City, the pyramid, and read your two books. How's that sound?
That'll be great. It'll be nice to have that energy there.
All right. Ava Miles, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today. We really appreciate this. And again, I encourage our viewers and readers to look at getting a copy of your books. The Goddess Guide series, We Are All Gods and Goddesses.
That's right. Time to rock it.
Time to rock it. My favorite divine rock star. Okay, you have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Ava Miles, everybody.